This is Eric Pepke for Dead Man Video. This video is Life After Prison Redux. It's a follow-up to my earlier Life After Prison video. There are probably going to be a bunch of these, but this is just one of them. Now, I'm going to ramble a bit. Who? Moi? Little old ich ramble? Yeah. But I include quite a lot of things that every responsible American citizen should know. That is, if such an improbable, fantastic beast can ever be conceived of. Before we get to the main story, I have to tell a little bit of backstory. Set the Wayback Machine, Sherman, for, 15 years ago. I knew a guy who was a lawyer, and I didn't really like him very much, but I knew him. And online, I saw a discussion where he was wondering why people hate lawyers so much. And a couple of people said, well, it's because they lie a lot. And he got all affronted and said, well, we're officers of the court and we're not allowed to lie, blah, 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 blah. It was only after I did some legal research in prison that I was able to realize what an astonishing lie that was. Now, you may have heard about qualified immunity, and there are excellent videos on it, and it's usually, specifically, though it applies to any federal employee, how you can't sue the cops for beating you up or doing something bad unless you have a constitutional right that has been established by law, that is, by judicial precedent. And it makes it very, 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 very hard, because if there's any variation at all, pretty much, between your case and the case that established the right, then it doesn't count, and you can't sue. For example, if there's a case about attacking someone when he was lying down, and you have a case of being attacked while sitting down, no, it doesn't count, because the cops can't be expected to think that hard. So there's been a lot of objection to that. I thank Cory Booker for bringing this up. And people are outraged, and they should be. But have you heard of absolute immunity? Absolute immunity was established by a Supreme Court case called Imbler v. Pachtman. I think it was 1976. And you can't ever sue a prosecutor for anything that they do as part of their prosecutorial duties. Few exceptions. If a prosecutor lies at a press conference, he could sue. If a prosecutor actually fabricates evidence, you can sue. And maybe there are other exceptions, but you have to try them in court, and that's very hard. But prosecutors lie. They can lie. They're perfectly permitted to do it. They can knowingly put perjured testimony on the stand. They can knowingly and intentionally withhold evidence, and you can't do anything about it at all. The Supreme Court decided, well, legal penalties were sufficient to control this, but how often do you get a prosecutor prosecute a prosecutor for anything? Now, the justification for this was that, well, prosecutors can decide not to prosecute a case. They have discretion. And that's like when judges decide to dismiss a case. And so the prosecutor is performing a quasi-judicial function, and therefore they should have all the protections that judges have. And since judges have absolute immunity and you can't sue them, therefore you can't sue prosecutors. Now, this applies to every prosecutor in the United States. So not only do prosecutors, who I remind you are lawyers, Not only are they allowed to lie, but they're like judges. And this is true everywhere. That can work out in a couple of ways, but it certainly violates what your preconceptions probably are, that there's a prosecutor and then there's a defense and then there's a judge who's supposed to be impartial in the middle. And that's how justice is served. No, pretty much prosecutors and judges are always going to be on the same side. In the federal system, from my experience, how this always works out is that the judges are on the side of the prosecutors. And they are as aggressive and adversarial and as much against defendants as you can possibly imagine. Up until I was released, I had only really experience with the federal system. But I kept in mind, it's possible that state systems are different and maybe better. And I found out that this was true. So set the Wayback Machine forward till last week. As I described elsewhere, I had filed my petition with a supplemental brief and a motion for discovery and an evidentiary hearing and a bunch of really good exhibits. And they told me, well, normally this is going to be May 6th is going to be when you appear before the judge. And I was thinking, well, if they do this by then, if they do it without responding to my petition in any substantial way, then I've got them. That's a terrible thing to do. I actually thought the district attorney, who is the person who is responsible for deciding the date, would be smart enough not to do it at that time and force my hand, because I would have more stuff to file and more fun to have. Well, they also told me that I would get a notice in the mail of when I actually was to appear in court. I did not. But I thought, it would be a bad thing if I missed it just because I hadn't gotten something in the mail. So on Thursday, I went down to the courthouse to inquire about this. Somebody might say, oh, you could have called, but really, I want to do everything in person. I want to make sure that everyone I talk to remembers who I am in case I need that later in court, because maybe they'll lie to me. So the first mistake I made was I went into the wrong building. I went into the courthouse instead of the Justice Center. And they didn't let me in because I had this. This is a laser pointer. It's got... Now this is weird because it comes across as white on the video. Never mind. It's got a red laser and it's got an LED flashlight, which is probably a blue LED with some yellow phosphor in it. This was a profligate expenditure for me. It cost me $2 whole at the dollar store. And I thought it was a good deal, but still, $2 is quite a lot considering my financial situation or lack thereof. But I thought it was important to get it because they don't tell you this, but one of the most important things that you have to do when you get out of prison is rediscover who you are. And I'm a geek, and I am a geek of a certain age, and geeks of my age always carry laser pointers. And I'm an academic. It's come in handy a few times when I have to talk and they don't have a laser pointer, or the laser pointer batteries are dead, or something like that. So anyway, I couldn't come in because of this. I couldn't put it in my car because I don't have one. And they didn't have any way to keep it for me until I schlepped back out. another video I talked about systemic racism. This is a perfect example of something systemic. I do not believe for a nanosecond that somebody decided to do this to prevent poor people from appearing in court. Not because I don't think they're evil, but because I don't think they're smart enough to think of something so elaborately nefarious. Anyway, so I went back. Did I say Thursday? This was actually Wednesday. I went back, and so I had to come back down again on Thursday because the court case would be Friday. And I didn't want to go around town wearing my suit. I do have a suit which I fished out of the trash, and it's a pretty nice one. But I came back, then the next day I took the laser pointer off my keychain, and I went back in, realized it was the wrong building, went to the, but I went in anyway, and I talked to the clerk, and I asked some questions, because one of the things that, if this fails, I need to do is complain under habeas corpus. And the clerks did not know what habeas corpus was. They finally got somebody who did know, and she said some peculiar things to me. Like, she said, well, we don't have habeas corpus here. I said, what? We don't have the forms. And I said, I don't need a form. I can type it up, but I need to know where to file it. And she said, oh, well, you know, the district attorney does that. I said, this is strange. And said, go to the district attorney and they'll tell you if you can file as a private citizen. Well, of course I can file as a private citizen. It's guaranteed by the suspension clause of the Constitution, and that's what it's for. But then I realized, oh, you're thinking habeas corpus ad testificandum. I'm talking habeas corpus ad subjiciendum. And I got the blank slip there, which told me everything I needed to know. So I left. I went to the Justice Center, which I'd been through before, and they hadn't stopped me for my laser pointer. They all have different rules. I don't know why. I went up to the clerk, and she found my name and sent me a printout, and yes, it would be Friday at 9:30. So I'm thinking, what are they doing here? I haven't had a chance to file a response to their response. I haven't gotten their response. I haven't gotten anything. I haven't gotten served. So what do? So I got up really early. I got up at 5 a.m. Because I have to deal with the buses. And I'm glad I did, because one of the buses didn't come. And so dressed up in my suit. I borrowed a shirt for it. I had a tie, again, fished out of the trash. No, actually, I think the tie was in another shipment at the halfway house. I wore my prison medical shoes, because I don't have any dress shoes, but they're black. It's okay. I got there. I sat around in the waiting area for the thing to open, and went in and sat up front. Everybody else was sitting in the back, but I wanted to pay attention. And so the judge came in and greeted the prosecutor and the defense attorney for turned out two of the people who were there. So this was interesting change from the federal system, because this session, Friday morning, was all about people trying to get off the registry. The federal SORNA requirement, where they essentially blackmail states into providing a registry by withholding funds if they don't, has some requirements. It would be too unconstitutional to specify it at a really deep level. But one is that for certain offenses, you can petition to have your name taken off the register in 10 years, and for other offenses, you have to wait 15 years. So the first couple of people with the lawyer, it was an amazing change from what I'd ever experienced at the federal system. In this case, I think they handled the judge-prosecutor incest relationship by making it so that the prosecutor is more like a judge, that is, more independent. The prosecutor did not object to anything, and the judge didn't object to anything, so they were both off the registry. I was there, and I heard my name. He said, "I'm looking for Eric Pepke." And so I thought I was next. So I got up and I, went through the little waist-high door, and she said, "No, I've just got to talk to you outside." And so I followed her outside, and she introduced herself, and she said that she was from the public defender's office, and would I be interested in being represented by her? And I said I would be delighted. And we talked a little bit. She hadn't seen anything in my case, but I saw the papers later, and they did have the supplemental brief and the exhibits with them, so they got those, so they knew about it. But she set up an appointment for me later. She said, "Well, all we're going to do now is I'm going to get appointed as your lawyer." So we went in, and we did that, and it was painless. And I even thanked the judge, and I went to sit back down, and she said, "Well, you can go now." I said, "No, I'm going to stay here and learn." I wanted to suss out the culture, and I wanted to see some of these cases. Well, all of them were about getting off the registry, and this is interesting because when you get embroiled in the federal system, you are basically assigned a judge, and you get that judge forever. Now, some people say it's a random assignment, but I don't know that. I don't know that it isn't deliberate to find a particularly sympathetic judge. The process is opaque, and since they lie about everything else, I will not believe them or take anything they say at face value. But apparently, at the state level, or at least this state, North Carolina, there is a judge assigned to this particular kind of case. And that is much, much better, because you've got a federal judge, and the federal judge essentially has to do everything. They're assigned by person, not by case type. And so the judge is never going to become an expert in a particular type of law. And here, apparently, this was the judge who was assigned to the registry cases. And he seemed like a very, very nice guy. And he was. And he was lenient. I have never seen the rule of lenity applied in the federal system, but it's pretty obvious to me. My conclusion is that they know that the registry is a joke, which it is. I've done a fair amount of research into it. I can't claim to know everything, but I have seen no evidence that the registry has prevented a single crime. It has caused a lot of them because it essentially destroys your ability to re-enter society, and people who are prevented from re-entering society, and this is the American dream, by the way, I mean preventing people from entering society. Well, what are they going to do except try to make money criminally? If they can't get a job, they can't get a place to live, they're either going to die or they're going to do something that you probably don't like them to do. So there were several cases, and there were only two that didn't get it. One was a guy who had filed in the wrong jurisdiction. He was supposed to have filed in Forsyth County. But both the DA and the judge were extremely helpful. They said, well, I'm not allowed to give you legal advice, but I got to tell you I don't know what to do with this, because if I deny it, then you've got to wait a year. Whereas if you withdraw it, then you can go to Forsyth County and do it immediately. And the guy had enough going up here, was swift enough on the uptake to voluntarily to deny it. And the other case was one where the judge deeply regretted it, and I think he was sincere, because the law was that he had to reapply. He had to apply after 15 years, the federal law, and that was a couple of years in the future. So he said, "I've got to deny this. You can come back in whatever year it was, 2024, something like that." And yeah, it was fantastic. Everybody else got off, even those who had probation violations. He didn't care about those. There was one where a guy had a violation where he got into an argument with his baby mama and kicked the door open. They got her up on the stand to tell her side of the story. And a long time ago, I did a lot of work with people who had experienced domestic abuse. And one of the things that happens frequently is that the abuse victim will defend the abuser, and you call that the Stockholm Syndrome, call it Nietzschean raisonnement, call it whatever you want. But after doing that, you get a feel for when this happens. I saw no evidence that this was anything other than a minor altercation where he had come in and somehow there was a miscommunication about the day he was going to come in and see his child. He talked about, how he was interested in getting a CDL, and he was doing quality assurance at Food Lion, and they gave him a little bit of tongue lashing, saying, don't kick doors open. But he didn't care about any of the other less severe violations, but he got off. Now they went to the back, and I went back, and I advised the guy about where he could get somebody to pay for a CDL for him, and maybe he does it. I hope he does well. It seems okay. So I got the impression that they really found the registry not good, and probably an administrative nightmare. They have to spend a lot of money for actually no benefit because of some symbolic Eurolagnia between the federal government and the mighty responsible citizens of these United States. Now, I felt pretty good about it. I felt that I had at least a chance. And usually what happens when I feel I have a chance is that when I'm asleep, the various parts of my brain come up with anything they can to get me down, and I wake up depressed. And this didn't happen. So we shall see what happens with this. I'll go back, and I can't talk to the public defender next week because she's in training. The week after that, I am going to pick her brain mercilessly. I'm going to ask about habeas corpus. One of the things I want to bring up is the motion for discovery, because I realize that under the law and the safe harbor clause, it would actually be perfectly legal for me to have a copy of the not child pornography image that I was imprisoned for, which has never, I think, been seen or examined by the judge. I'm allowed to have up to 1 or 2 images as long as the judge or the police know about it, and of course if I get it from the judge, I'll have it. Then I might be able to run a public awareness campaign. I might be able to show you the image, in which case he will see instantly that I was wrongfully convicted. So far, it's been like pushing a peanut around the block with my nose at the federal level. I might be able to work it so that I can use this new evidence for another federal habeas corpus. And so things are looking up, I believe. This is the first glimmering, the first glimpse that I have had that the courts are even remotely interested in providing justice. I still have a barrier at the federal level, especially because of what Little Willie Clinton did to habeas corpus. Unfortunately, the suspension clause only says that you can't suspend habeas corpus. It doesn't say you can't gut it, which is what Clinton did. And I'm not the only one who's saying that. Look, it looks like I'm not going to have to do a playlist because I think I got through it all. Anyway, ta-ta for now.